everybody. Thanks so much for joining us right here on The Right View. Tonight, we are joined by one of the smartest people I know, and probably one of the smartest you know, and the host of the daily Dinesh D'Souza podcast. You guessed it, Dinesh D'Souza. Well, welcome back, Dinesh. We're always excited to get your thoughts on things, and congrats on the new podcast.
Thank you very much. It's really fun. I'm doing it both in audio and video, and it allows me to kind of be myself and talk about a range of issues. So I really appreciate it, and do check it out.
Yeah, well, look, people want to hear from you because you do have a lot of insight. And I want to start by getting your thoughts on Hunter Biden's laptop. It has now been verified by investigators, Dinesh, to be his, contrary to what the media and social media companies tried to cover up. And it's really been revealing a wealth of evidence that Hunter engaged in shady and possibly illegal business transactions in Ukraine and communist China. So I think my question is, where is the fear from the elected Democrats and the liberal media that Joe Biden's White House might be compromised?
Yeah, I've been really chuckling and watching these Hunter Biden interviews, Laura, where, he'll say things like, well, it could be my laptop, or it could be Russian intelligence. Who really knows? Now, they could easily probe him by saying, hey, Hunter, wait a minute. There are all these emails that have come out from the laptop. Did you write those? Yes or no? But so you get the idea that the media is doing a kind of fake probing, and that allows Hunter to dodge and pretend like this really isn't his laptop when it obviously is. I also note that all the juicy stuff on the laptop is missing from Hunter Biden's book. So here's Hunter Biden writing this tell-all book, but he left all the juicy stuff out.
Yeah, well, I can't imagine why he'd want to do that, Dinesh. I also feel like it's worth remembering this laptop only offers a glimpse into what was probably really going on in the background for Biden and the Biden family. I mean, who knows how much more there is? It's actually a little frightening, Dinesh, to see the information that is on there, to see those emails, to your point. What else do you think might be out there? I mean, this is concerning stuff.
Well, the biggest issue is the financial corruption, which doesn't just involve Hunter Biden, but the whole family. And this started to come out before the election. The media kind of ganged up to try to suppress it. Of course, Hunter Biden is recently asked about it, but again, he dodges the issue. He said something like, somebody just asked him straight out, how much were you paid monthly by Burisma? And this is Hunter Biden's response. He goes, I don't want to be inaccurate, so I'm not going to give you an exact number. Oh. He's acting as though his main concern here was for scrupulous accuracy to the letter of dollars and cents. But of course, he doesn't want to say, because if he says I was being paid $83,000 a month and my business partner another $83,000 a month, so each of us are getting $1 million a year, it might occur to people to say, for what? You have no experience in energy. You have no experience in Ukraine. So there was a racket going on that involved the whole Biden family. Hunter Biden was kind of a bag man. And so you've got the sex scandals, you've got the drug scandals, you've got all the gun scandal, all of that's going on. But I think the financial scandal, which was essentially selling Biden's office, that's probably the most worrisome.
Yeah, well, Dinesh, I'm so glad that I'm able to talk to you about all of this, because you were someone who was targeted by the government and by the liberal media for being a vocal critic. So I want to get your response, because I'd love to know how you feel about the absolute and total love fest for Hunter Biden. I mean, we see him doing these interviews where, to your point, he doesn't even get pressed on any of these questions. He doesn't even have to answer them. They just sweep it under the rug.
I mean, this is a train of immunity that started off with the Clintons. I mean, those guys have been running rackets since their Whitewater days back in Arkansas. And somehow they've always stayed one step ahead of the posse. And I think that inspired others. So Biden, for example, figured out that the Clintons had been running an international racket through the Clinton Foundation. He probably figured, why don't I get in on it? So he established a racket very similar. It's kind of a shakedown operation. He used family members instead of the foundation. But if you look at the essential contours of the two operations, the Biden racket was very much in the same train as the Clinton racket.
Yeah. To me, I think it's hard for the average person to look at this and not see the hypocrisy, because, Dinesh, what would the consequences be for the average person who wasn't Hunter Biden if they did anything like any of this stuff. I mean, just look at, when he filled out this federal paperwork for a gun, he lied on there. If the average person did that, would they not be in jail?
They absolutely would. So what this is giving you the idea, and me the idea, is that we don't have a really working legal system that holds people equally accountable under the law. You've got this kind of immunity that you get when you're high up in the Democratic Party on the left. I mean, one of the most disheartening things is to see the way in which apparently the FBI, this police agency of government, many of us have this kind of idea of the FBI from the movie The Untouchables. They're going after the bad guys, they're cracking down on the mafia. But evidently, they've been corrupted, at least at the top level, and who knows how far all the way down, because you see, even in other cases, not involving the Bidens, the FBI is going after the January 6 defendants with a kind of relentless and ruthless aggression. Meanwhile, there's all kinds of riots going on right now as we speak. The FBI is nowhere to be seen, so somehow real riots don't get treated like riots. And a bunch of guys jostling through the Capitol, waving signs, playing around with Nancy Pelosi's desk, taking selfies. Those are apparently the people we need to be really scared of, and the FBI will leave no stone unturned to identify and go after all of them.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's crazy. It feels like we're living in, I don't know, some sort of alternative reality sometimes. When I first saw this information that came out about Hunter Biden, the most recent stuff off of the laptop, Dinesh, I have to tell you that my immediate reaction was, what if any of us in the Trump family had done anything close to this? Even if we put aside the illegal business deals and possible corruption between the drugs, the prostitution, things like discarding firearms and garbage cans near schools, I can't for a moment imagine what would have happened if one person in my family had done one of these things, or there was even a faint hint of evidence that we had done one of these things. Yet we know that Hunter Biden did these things. I think back to, 2016, 2017, when our family was accused of colluding with Russia to win a presidential election, when they dragged my brother-in-law to testify in front of Congress. Whenever they put our entire family through hell, we put the country through 2 years of an investigation, tens of millions of dollars of taxpayer money to find out in the end, no, in fact, no one colluded with Russia. They have done everything they can to destroy our family, and we actually did everything right, Dinesh. What do you think would have happened if any of us had done any of these things that Hunter Biden did?
Well, when you look at the fact that President Trump was hauled out for impeachment for making a pretty innocuous phone call and then impeached a second time, you just ask a simple question. Just look at the Trump family's fortunes over the time that President Trump was in office. Yeah. The Trump family lost money. President Trump didn't take a salary. Now you look at the Biden family's fortunes over the time that he's been in high office. Well, it turns out that they have ladled in, raked in suitcases of cash, millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars. So right there, you can see who has benefited from high office and who hasn't. I was so angry when I saw, was it Jimmy Kimmel talking to Hunter Biden, and he goes, ha, 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 doesn't it really get you? Because, here's Donald Trump Jr., he's a beneficiary of all this nepotism and so on. And apparently the implication was Hunter Biden was marvelously qualified. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. Can you imagine the uproar if Donald Trump Jr. had been collecting $83,000 from an energy company, and essentially Trump was the point man in dealing with foreign aid flowing to the Ukraine? So this is a case where the corruption involves the high office itself. And I don't think anyone in your family has with any degree of credibility been accused of anything even remotely similar.
Yeah, and I think the frustrating thing, too, is where is the truth in all this? I mean, we are supposed to be able to rely on journalism. We're supposed to rely on our media to report information, to give us the facts, to set the record straight. And sadly, Dinesh, we all know the truth. The reality is the mainstream media, by and large, is a marketing arm for the Democrat Party. They go out of their way to try and damage anyone that does not go along with their agenda, with their narrative. You've seen recently what they've tried to do to Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, with his 60 Minutes interview. Really shameful stuff. But I think, sadly, it does work sometimes, because there are so many people that just take what they say, they digest it immediately, they have no critical thought about anything. I wonder, do you think we ever get back to a place where we can trust our media, where they actually will report facts instead of just, propaganda and pushing out their own narrative?
I don't think we will, at least not in the short term. I think what we really want is we want people to be able to see through it. Now, I think the good news is that in the past, the media was still very biased, but they were more subtle about it. So they would, for example, draw a distinction between the news pages and the editorial pages. Now, admittedly, most of their choices of investigative news stories were aimed at damaging our side, and they wouldn't investigate things correspondingly on their side. But they at least tried to maintain this church and state distinction between news and opinion. You'll notice now in the Project Veritas lawsuit that the New York Times basically admits that they put opinion into their news pages. In fact, when they accused Project Veritas of things like misinformation, and Project Veritas said, show us some misinformation, show us where we said something that was wrong, the Times goes, well, that's just our opinion. We're not actually making any factual statement about what you're doing or not doing. We don't have to prove anything because that's just our point of view, even though this point of view is appearing squarely on the news page in a supposedly news article. So you hope that people begin to see that the press is a kind of, I sometimes call them the courtier press, because they're like, remember in the French court, you had all these courtiers, jesters and jugglers and so on, and their job is to amuse the monarchy and the aristocracy. A Biden press conference sounds and looks like something like that.
That's a really good analogy. I never thought of it like that. Sadly, I mean, that's true. It's very sad to see. I don't even think you can call it a press conference. You have to do kind of air quotes around it. I want to ask you this because you spent a lot of time, Dinesh, investigating the Clintons, the Obamas, and the Bidens. I want to get a sense from you. Is there any overlap or patterns or similarities between these groups that you have found that maybe the people should know about?
Well, I think that this gangsterization of the American government really began, I think, seriously with Obama. Now, there might have been some hints of it under Clinton, but I think Clinton was under sufficient checks and balances. Remember, Republicans held both houses of Congress. And I also think that the media was more critical of Clinton. If you think back to where did the media go from being left-leaning to essentially becoming a propaganda operation? And I think the answer was Obama. Obama came in as the first black president. It was almost like he was the messiah. So the press coverage became more and more genuflecting and more devotional. And I think when that happened, the Obama people realized, and Hillary, who was part of that administration, realized, hey, listen, we can get away with whatever we want. No matter what kinds of shenanigans and rackets we start, the press is not going to cover it. They haven't covered Benghazi. They haven't covered the Bergdahl trade. Why on earth should they care if we're taking in money all over the world from different? So that began with Hillary, but it began in the Obama years. And I think we've seen it continue with Biden. And now who knows what's going to be happening in the Biden administration.
Terrifying stuff. Well, it's something that definitely we want to keep our eye on. And I know people love hearing from you. So tell our viewers and our listeners, where can they find your podcast? When can they hear from you?
Well, I tape the podcast every day. I put it up an hour or so later, so it goes up midday. It's an audio. It's available on Apple and Spotify and also Google Audio, and it's available in video on YouTube and Rumble. So you can watch it the way you watch a TV show, or you can listen to it while you're doing something else or driving. It's an audio and video on a bunch of platforms.
I love it. You could have your AirPod in and still be around your kids, but not fully engaged with them is what you're telling us. So maybe some parents, not that I would ever do something like that. Maybe some parents want to do that. All right. Well, Dinesh, I want to say thank you. You are always insightful. You always give us great information, and we appreciate you being on today. So thanks for being with us. And to all of our viewers at home and our listeners, thanks as always. We'll see you back here next time for more of The Right View.